guys, welcome back to another episode of the Unfiltered Entrepreneur. I'm your host, Ashli Pollard. Whether you're listening here, whether you're watching on YouTube, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so excited to announce that we have had over 150 new members join the Doers in the past few months, and I'm blown away. I really don't think I could put into words how much it means to me that we see this space grow, that we see women joining us here who are ambitious, who are looking for growth, who want to stay connected to the thing that makes them human, who want to make an impact, who want to treat each other well and lift each other up the ladder. It's just, you guys never cease to amaze me. You inspire me to no end. I'm just so grateful. I'm so in love with my job. I'm so in love with where we're going. Some of the stuff that I have up my sleeve will shock you. The Doers Club knows everything. I tell them everything because I'm a loudmouth. But regardless, I just want to let you know that it is my honor to stay in service to the women in this space. And this membership is completely free if you want it to be. You can join the Doers as a free member, and we will never judge you for not becoming a paid member of the library or the club. Now, the library is great if you want to DIY a lot of your business. I think you're going to be shocked when you realize how much you can probably do yourself with the resources that we have in there. And the club is where I'm on demand. It's where the community is on demand. That's where we're sharing jobs. That's where you get weekly office hours. I'm 24/7 in that Slack channel and on demand for you so that you have a mentor that you can afford for $197 a month. And so all of this is to say thank you for being such an incredible community of women. And thank you for sharing the podcast. I see it. I appreciate it. If you haven't yet, take this second while you're listening to leave a quick review on Apple or to subscribe on Apple or Spotify and leave a review or a rating if you can. It would mean the world to me. There's a lot that I have brewing behind the scenes. People are really looking at these numbers. And if you are an active participant of this space, it is so helpful for you to just hit that button to rate, to review, and to share this with friends. Thank you so much. Let's dive into the episode. Now, in our Instagram broadcast channel, I asked what topic people needed to hear more. And I said we could either dive into the topic of feeling behind on your journey or sacrificing and growing pains that come with business. And do I have to be in pain to be growing and to be successful? Do I really have to be giving up all of this stuff that people say I have to? We'll get to that topic, but it was clear that people wanted to hear more about feeling behind and feeling overwhelmed by kind of that timeline. And I have a lot to say about this. You know, I've had such a big life. I feel like my life started early because, I had a lot of kind of like tumultuous chaos in my childhood that really forced me to be an adult. I felt quite young. And so for me, I kind of feel like I grew up at like age 8 and have lived so many lives. Not only that, though, I also had a really big decade in my 20s. I moved to New York. I built this massive career for myself. I did sacrifice a lot. And then in my 30s, this is when I started this business, and I'm 37, I'll be 38 in just a few months, which is crazy. And as I near my 40s, there are some things that I'm really excited about and that I know that I'll be able to do because of my 20s and my 30s. And so I have a little bit of a unique opinion on timeline and growth and change. And I want to talk about it because it's so fair. I think it's one of the biggest themes I see come up inside of the Doers, whether that's on office hours, whether that's in our Slack channel or in my one-on-one calls with you. This is a topic I hear a lot. There's a comparisonitis, let's say, against someone else where it's like, well, look at what they're doing. Look how far they are. Look at what this family has. Look at what this person has. And there's almost a bit of like, why am I back here? Or when is my time? When does it work for me? When does it work out in my favor? And I know that feeling well. I experience that feeling, and it's fair. It is valid. So I just want to kick off this conversation by saying if you feel like you look at other people, or even if you don't look at other people, but you look at yourself and you look at where you wish you were by now, or where you want to go, or how far you have to go, and you say, I am not where I wanted to be, or this is not where I thought I would be by now, that is fair. Don't let anybody tell you that that is a silly way to feel or that you're not entitled to feel that way. Those human experiences are just that. They're very fair human experiences. And I'm here to validate that. And I'm also here to give you some tricks to get out of that mindset. Maybe not for good. We're humans. We backslide into bad spaces. But I do want you to be equipped in your emotional tool belt to be able to say, I have a way out of this. I have a way to not compare myself to others. I have a way to look at what I'm doing and actually feel like I'm in the right place at the right time. Now, the first thing that I want to touch on before I dive into how your 20s might be different from your 30s and your 40s, and if you're in your 20s, I want you listening to all of that. And if you're in your 40s, I also want you to listen to all of that just to kind of reflect back a little bit and see how far you've come. But before we even get into that conversation, one thing that I do think is very important to touch on is the fact that if you want to dream about a big life and have all of these dreams happen to you and come true, you have to realize that dreaming really exists, honestly, at your safest and your most secure. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. There are people that have come to me and said, like, in the future, I'm going to do this, or I want to launch that, or I want to do that. And they are maybe like not making the money that they want to be, or maybe they don't know how to pay their rent, or maybe they're very deeply in debt. And what's interesting is that when I get them across that line and they say, I'm making money, I'm out of debt, or even if they I'm not trying to make this about me, even if they get out of debt, they get to that place where they're making money, they're good, they're safe, they're secure, sometimes those dreams change. And the reason why is because there's times that we place a lot of weight or emphasis on different dreams because we're coming from a place of scarcity and fear. Let me give you an example of this. I have a friend of mine who is just in a state of flux. Maybe she feels chaotic. I don't think she is chaotic, but she might feel chaotic. She might feel a little bit out of sorts. She might feel a little bit just discombobulated, we could say is the right word for how she may feel at this moment. And she came to me and she said, Ashli, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to get my head above water. And then just you watch, next year, I'm going to have XYZ. And I said to her, we'll see about that. And what's interesting is we had this whole conversation where I said to her, I'm not doubting that you're going to make that happen. You're a go-getter, you're smart, you're ambitious, you're creative, you're incredible, you're kind. So I don't doubt that you can do those things. But I'm curious, when you feel grounded, when you feel secure, when you feel better, just generally better, will you even desire those things in the future? Because they could just look nice now when things are hard. And I think we've all probably experienced that at some level. We say, when I get through this launch, that's when I'm going to launch my podcast. When really, maybe we just want the podcast today because we're trying to find a way through, right? Maybe we need to be heard. Maybe we have something to say. Maybe we need to vent, right? And then you get safe and secure and you say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want that. Dreaming comes when you feel safe and secure. And I will say this so loudly often that the number one goal, the first goal in your business is simply get safe and secure in your financials. And that may not mean that you have consistent revenue, but that does mean that you have some level of safety. You have some semblance of predictability, even if that's still kind of up in the air, but you feel confident about where you're going, about your money, your bills are paid, that you're set, because you're going to see some dreams come up that you didn't expect. And those are real dreams that live inside of you that say, wait, now that we're safe and secure, what if we could do this thing that is really crazy and exciting? So just know that that is coming down the line. And I want to talk about this timeline, right? This down the line idea of it all, because life is long and life is short. Something that I think is really important to understand is this idea that life is short, I think has really put a burden specifically on women. We do have a little bit of a timeline for some things. And I think that this life is short mentality has put all of the pressure on your 20s to be the game-changing decade. And I just could not disagree more with that sentiment. I think that so much of your career is built outside of your 20s, and I'll come back to that. But I do want you to come back to, more than anything, for the majority of us, life is long. Now, of course, there are accidents along the way. There are people that we've lost young, and it can change the way that we view life, where we say, I want to live a big life, if 35 is my last day or whatever it is. I get that sentiment, and I don't necessarily want you to lose that piece of it, but I do want you to remember that the average person lives until their 80s. That means that a lot of people, most people, will live until their 80s. And I like to think about my decades as chapters. And 10 years feels very long, especially when 1 year feels like it can break you. 10 years feels crazy. But you will get to 37 and you'll look back and you will see your life in these kind of like decade chapters where things just are different from, I don't know, 0 to 10, let's say, but then 10 to 20 and 20 to 30 and now 30 to where I'm at 37, almost 38. And it is very interesting how these chapters kind of form and how different every decade is amongst each other. You know, there's a quote that I love from Sex and the City where she says something to the extent of like, enjoy your 20s. That's what it's for. Your 30s are to learn the lessons and your 40s are to buy the drinks. And I love this. And there's ways that I interpret this that I kind of want to share with you. And I want to talk about each of these decades because I know that we have listeners in their 20s. I know we have listeners in their 30s and some in their 40s. And I want to talk to you specifically. And I want us all to understand this full timeline. You know, I do really believe that your 20s are to be enjoyed. I think a lot of people go into their 20s thinking they're going to have it all figured out. I'm going to know exactly what I meant to do in my career. I'm going to know exactly who I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. I know exactly where I'm going and where I'm going to live, and I'm going to start building this life. And I just want to remind you that this concept of building that life and building that foundation in your 20s is antiquated. That stems from the 1950s when the average life expectancy was 55, 60, 65. So when we think about our 20s as this time to place roots, there's nothing wrong with doing it. But if you're on a timeline where it doesn't look like your 20s are going to be that time for roots, where you haven't quite found your career, or when you haven't quite met that person, or when you haven't quite met yourself in a deep way, that's okay. You know, when I was 20, 21, 22, I moved to New York City. I graduated from college, packed up my stuff, drove a U-Haul across the country, and it's so crazy. I had enough money only for 1 month of rent, and we didn't have an apartment. While we were driving to New York City, we were calling brokers. Hey, we're on our way up. Do you have anything for us? We'll take anything. We just need a month-to-month rent. And our plan was we get to New York, we get any job, and we figure it out. And we did, you know, we being one of my close friends at the time, Chelsea and I. And so we get to New York. A friend of mine told me about a restaurant she loved in Times Square called Bon 45. And so I unpacked one day. The next day, I went into Bon 45, the only restaurant I had heard of, and said, can I be a hostess or a server here? They said yes, and I started working at Bon 45. Now, at the time, I also had an internship at Oscar de la Renta. I was working for free there and also working at the restaurant, and I was making no money. And when I say I was making no money, I was making some money because the restaurant was paying me. The restaurant was also feeding me, you know, multiple meals a day, which was amazing. But it was not going to last, old Ashli Pollard. Like, I had no money. There were times that I couldn't afford to get back on the subway home, and it was $2.50. Like, it was that bad. And slowly things got a little bit better. I took jobs in the fashion industry. It was really important to me at the time that I start my fashion industry career at good labels, even if that meant taking an incredibly low salary. So while other people who I knew were getting salaries for like $55,000, $60,000 entry, I was getting paid like $35,000 for the same job. So it was a crazy time. I remember my friend and I had such little money that the only thing that we could afford to eat was popcorn. So we would buy these massive bags of popcorn kernels and just pop popcorn and have popcorn kernels, like not the, like we would pop it, right? But we would have that for like every single meal. And people would be like, are you good? And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'm just broke. I'm just really fucking broke. I'll be fine. And it gets better, you know, the next job pays you a little more and the next job pays you a little more. And this was like the first 5 years of my fashion industry career. And keep in mind, while I was in the fashion industry, I joined the wholesale like segment of the fashion industry. If you know anything about it, it's like kind of sales and marketing wrapped up in one. And I got into this part of the career not really knowing anything about it, but I thought that I was moving to New York to become the editor-in-chief of a magazine. And that path rerouted. Partially because I said, I'm up to learn, you know, and that's part of your 20s, that messy exploration. Who am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? Also in my 20s, I fell in love. And I met a man who I loved very deeply, and we had a 7-year relationship. We had some off periods in that 7 years, but we were together for quite some time. It was a really beautiful relationship. We loved each other a lot. We had obviously a closeness and knew each other's families and those types of things. And it's so funny because starting my social media journey when I'm like in my mid 30s, a lot of you guys don't know a lot of this stuff. You don't know him. You don't know what our relationship was like. You don't know what he looks like. You don't know what he does. You don't know anything about him. And that's so funny to me. But he was is such a beautiful person. And our relationship just never really worked. And it wasn't necessarily to either of our faults as much as it was like things were pulling us in different directions. We were in completely different stages of life. We wanted different things out of life. And the way that I could put it is that we were like a puzzle piece that was just trying to fit into the wrong spot. And the picture itself could be beautiful, but that's not where I was supposed to be, and that's not where he was supposed to be. And we went our separate ways when I was, I guess 28, 29. And it was a great relationship. I don't regret it. I don't regret breaking up. I, wish him the best. And it's so funny because you look back on these relationships and you think, this is it, and this is so important to me. And we practically lived together, having this like, where is my career going and where is my relationship going, and figuring that out in my 20s. I'm grateful that I did not put the pressure on myself to say, I need to lock this in immediately. Through my 20s, I gave myself a lot of grace. Like, I'm allowed to change my mind at any point. I can break up with this person and start from scratch. I can leave this job and go to a completely different space. And I did that, I moved my life around and I followed things that I felt like, could this be me? I was trying on a lot of hats, right? I was trying on a lot of different personas. Am I this person? Am I this person? Am I this person? And that's kind of what your 20s feel like. It feels like putting on a ton of different outfits to see what fits. How do I live in my life? Who am I? What drives me? What makes me angry? What makes me feel joy? What makes me feel lit up? What are my skills? I don't know what I'm good at, right? Who would have known that I was good at Excel unless I took this random job that asked me, it was so funny. When I started the job at Prada, they said we require an Excel test. They told me this on the spot, or they told me like beforehand, I think. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I have to hire an Excel tutor, because I told them, oh my God, I'm a master at Excel. And then for some reason, unbeknownst to anybody, I'm the only person in this office's like history that they didn't put through the Excel test. I think because I said I was a master at it. I was like, oh yeah, all of that, that's nothing. And then I start the job and I'm like, how do I do a VLOOKUP? Had to learn Excel super quickly. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have realized how much I love Excel, which made me incredibly good at my job, top of my game, highly sought after, really well paid, flown in jets across the country and across the world, London, Paris, Italy, South America. And so it's really funny how these detours tend to happen, and they happen a lot through life, but I feel like they happen the most in your 20s, mainly because you're not tied down to something typically, unless you do have kids or a husband or things like that, but I didn't have those things. And so these detours are kind of fun in your 20s, and I encourage you to view this time as the time for it. If you're in your 20s, this time of possibility, this time of exploration, and saying, I'm not required to know who I am yet, but I am required to get to know her. I'm not required to know what industry or career or job I'm meant to be at, but I am required to try. I'm not required to settle down with the person that I'm dating in my 20s, even if I've been with them for 5 years. I can say, I'm not ready, and separate. I ended that relationship, and like I said, I don't look back. I am not upset about it. I think that it is one of those really pivotal moments that led me to myself, and to say, I know that I'm always going to choose what I feel like is best for me at all times. And I'm so grateful for that learning. I'm so grateful for that lesson. And those lessons are what you get in your 20s. Throughout my 20s also, I had a job in the fashion industry. I could say I had a 12-year career in the fashion industry. But what you don't see is I bounced around. Now, that's not super crazy in the fashion industry. It's not really all that wild in your 20s to move brands often in the role that I was in. But, I was at Oscar de la Renta, and I went to Gucci, and then I went to BCBG Max Azria, which I never talk about. And then I went to Prada, and then Sam Edelman, and then Rebecca Minkoff, and then Hunter Boots, and Kendall and Kylie. And it's like, I did a lot. That was all in my 20s, by the way. Like multiple jobs in my 20s. Now, granted, some of those I stayed for 3 months. Some of those I stayed for 6 months. And I left. I remember my first day at one of those jobs. I called my headhunter and I said, get me the fuck out of here. I will not be able to live here even one more day. And she was like, I'll find something for you. And I said, how long until you get paid for placing me here? She said 3 months. And I said, Kayla, 3 months and a day, I better have another fucking job, okay? Like, I need to get out of here. I want you to get paid. I will push through for 90 days so that you get paid, but you better have the job of the century. And I said, I want to work at Rebecca Minkoff. And sure enough, 90 days plus one, I was starting at Rebecca Minkoff, which is incredible. So all of this is to say that, like, it's about building relationships. It's about testing like your boundaries and what you like and what you're interested in. And a lot of that is made in a really messy way. You know, you kind of learn, I don't really want to do that again because you made the mistake a couple times, right? And you might have to make it more than once. It's also the time where you say, I'm going to commit to this thing, and you hold on to it so tightly that you don't realize until way later, I really should have dropped that a long time ago. But none of that is shameful. None of that is bad. None of that is wrong. It is perfectly fine in your 20s to say, I'm going to explore. Because what you don't want to do is overcommit in your 20s and then later down the line say, I did not live that big. Now, I know that some of you listening to this are like, yeah, cool, Ashli, I'm not 20. I'm not 22. I'm not even 28. I am 30, 32, 35, 36 or up. And I get that. Like I said, I'm almost 38 myself. Your 30s are not necessarily a time that you're still exploring way differently than you are in your 20s though. You're trying things for the first time, you're falling, you're messing up, you're making mistakes. It's like all of it. It's just a melting pot of new and freshness. And in your 30s, you are trying new things, but you're also kind of like cementing into yourself. And if you get to do this in your 20s, that's a gift because this does tend to happen more in your 30s. And your 30s are the time when you want to settle into yourself, when you really want to build those roots into who you are. And it doesn't have to be roots in a career, doesn't have to be roots in a family, it can be. It doesn't have to be roots in a way that is external. It has to be roots that are into yourself. And it just kind of happens naturally. This is the time when you've gotten through a lot of the mess of your 20s. And now you're digging into, what do I value? And a lot of times it's because things are pushed on you. Maybe you're stretched to your limits and you say, you know what, I'm done with that. No more. No more of that. I will not take that again. There also could be the opposite, where you see something and you're like, I know that that is my type of person. I am friends with the person who treats me like this. I am in a relationship with someone who treats me like this. You know, you start to realize what your boundaries are. I will not be spoken to this way. I will not be treated this way. You also might expect that of the world. I will stand up for this. I will believe in this. I will educate myself on different topics. It's a time for real deepening of the relationship that you have with yourself. And it's your time to say, I know my strengths. I've now learned them. I've done all this testing and all this shifting and all this changing, and I see life differently, that I know where I'm strong and I know where I'm weak. And through your 30s, you tend to find the comfort systems for those weak points. Let me give you an example. I think that through your 30s, what I've experienced with myself and with many of my friends is that we start to say, wow, this is what I'm good at, this is what I believe, and this is what I'm about. But we also say, whether or not we voice it out loud, we also tend to say, okay, I'm really not so great at this, so I need to lean on my friends. I need to call a friend when I feel like this. You might also say, okay, I really know that this part of my life is something I can't ignore anymore, whether it's your health, whether it is your mental health, whether it's relationships with family members or a partner, or, you know, where you live. You might say, I gotta go. So we have these things in life that feel like, wow, I've noticed where I'm weakest, or I noticed where I'm most unhappy. And the goal is to build systems around that. Because the interesting thing about your 30s is that you just have seen more life. And this might differ from 39 to 30, obviously, but you do see more of life. You really do. In your 30s, you probably have gone through one, if not multiple, really, really foundation shattering heartbreaks, friendship breakups. You may have experienced loss of life of someone that you love. You experience a ton of rejection. You experience times when you're really pushing something and you do all the right things, and no matter what, it doesn't work out. And that type of rejection is really character forming, because how do you respond to, I did everything the way that I was supposed to. Why isn't this happening? And those types of experiences shape someone. Heartbreak, friendship breakups, loss, rejection. It shapes someone, it changes someone, and you view the world differently. You start to break open with this empathy of saying, like, I understand how that feels. Like, I get it differently. What I've noticed in my 20s is that a lot of my friends and I had maybe said things or implied things like, well, I would have never done it that way. And then you get into your 30s and you start to experience some of those things and you realize, I get it. I know why they were doing that now. Or I can have empathy for how someone could get there. There's a compassion. There's a level of seeing life through a different lens as you get older and as you root yourself more into who you are and what you like and what you want and what you'll tolerate and what you won't and what you value. And in your 30s, that's kind of what you're doing. You're kind of like weeding out all the mess. The decade of the 20s is like that big feast scene in Hook. And maybe I'm aging myself. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll put a picture on YouTube and on Spotify where you can see. But like, it's this big long table in the movie Hook, and there's just food everywhere. And that's kind of your 20s. It's just messy slop, like hands in a ton of different pots. And your 30s is kind of like a curated dinner that you put together. And you're saying, I don't like that food, get it off my table. Or I don't want to drink that. Or I don't want her here. Or I don't want it at that place. Like, I know what I want, and I know what will make my life beautiful, and I know what will make me happy. And your job in your 30s is to be relentless in that trimming, to be very clear about who stays, who goes, about saying, I'm releasing detachment. And what's really hard about that is that it may push against your timeline. It may push against this idea of like, well, she has it, and if I push it away, then I won't have it. But the key is, if you look at someone in the right relationship, if you look at someone in the job that she's killing it, if you look at the person with the kids who she's like loving and spending all of her time with, if you look at those things, what you want, sure, is that outcome. You could say, I want a job like that, or even specifically, I want that job. You could say, I want to hit that milestone. I want to get married. I want to have kids. And of course you see those things, but what your brain really sees is, I want to be happy like that. I want to have a happy marriage like I think she does. I want to love my job and make good money from it the way that I'm telling myself she does. I want to have, these kids, and I want to love the experience of motherhood the way that she does. So yes, it's that you want those things, but it's also, I want to love that. And so in your journey on your 30s, a lot of this is saying, what needs to be in place for me to love it? For instance, if it's a partner, you could get married right now to the wrong person. You could get married to someone where you say, I really don't want to start from scratch, and I completely understand that point of view. Because your head is doing this thing, your mind is doing this thing, and this could be applied to career, this could be applied to where you live, etc. But your mind does this thing where you're like, if I give up this kind of good thing, then I'm going to start all over, and I'm not going to have any of that thing. And so we accept these crumbs. And the job in your 30s is to say, no, I am not. If I know it's not right for me, it goes. If I know that this is not the right place for me, I go there. One of the easiest, best ways to think of things is, if I were to give you $10 million, how would you feel and what would you do with it? Someone could say, I'm going to start my business. I'm finally going to launch that apparel line. And I want to move to California. And then the trick there is to say, now you know what you desire. Out of all the mess that was my 20s, it is now my job to craft that. Enough of the bullshit. Because you're stronger where you are, you're stronger in your mindset, you're stronger in your belief system and in your value set to say, I gotta fucking call a spade a spade. I have to be done with some of this shit. And that's why you see a lot of divorces happen in their 30s, is because you just get to the point where you say, enough. I know what I like. I know what I value. I know what's important to me. I know what I have to work on, and some of it I just have to accept, and some of it I really have to pay some deep attention to. And to me, that's what your 30s are about, getting extremely honest with yourself and rooting yourself into you. Now listen, I can't speak for your 40s. I have not dipped my toe in that pond quite yet, okay? But I have dated men in their 40s. And I have a massive family. I don't know if you guys know this, but my dad's one of 1,000 fucking siblings. And so I have 9 million cousins. The thing that I've noticed happens when you hit your 40s is that you have the most fun. You talk to anybody in their 50s, their 60s, reflecting back on their 40s. They had more fun in their 40s than they did in their 20s. You have more money. You have more time. You have less debt. You have more investments. And all of this creates a safety and security that allows you to have a lot more fun. You hear people saying they have better sex in their 40s, that they are partying in their 40s, that they're traveling in their 40s, that they're investing in their 40s, that they're living better lives, that they finally have time for this, they finally have time for that. And I am so excited about my 40s because I have so much more money in my 30s, so much more freedom, so much more confidence and self-awareness. And if it's only gonna get better, my 30s are bar none better than my 20s. I can't wait for my 40s to get here. I know I'm gonna have more fun. I know that it's gonna be a better time. And I'm liking where I am right now. In your 40s, things boom. Right? And so that makes me so excited because if you're in your 20s and you're still kind of like feeling really unnerved, I just want you to know that at 37, I feel like this and last year, I am exactly in my body. And what I mean by that is I didn't feel like I was trying on all these other clothes. I wasn't trying on all these other lifestyles. I wasn't trying on all these other things. I said, I know who I am. I know what I'm about. I'm never going to be the girl that likes that. I'm never going to be the girl who's good at that. I'm never going to be the girl who wants what she wants. And that's okay. And there are people I compare myself to. There are people where I'm like, that road looks so good. But then I remember I have free will. I could have that. By wanting all of these things, I'm saying I don't like where I am. And I love where I am. And who am I to say that someone's not looking at me saying, I want what Ashli has. I want that. I want that adorable fucking house. I want to have that relationship she has with her nephews. I want to be child-free in 37. Who am I to say that I want what she has? Because I'm also simultaneously saying, fuck what I have today. I don't like it. And so one thing that really helps me with the comparisonitis game is to say, one, I do not know if they like what they have. I don't. I think there's people online that think I'm younger than I am. Thank you so much. My mom's Armenian, so my skin looks great. And I think that people look at me and they're like, she's only been in business 5 years and she started 5 businesses and she's made millions on millions. Not like any of that matters to me, but I know that people look at that and they see those things. And if I'm looking back at them saying, not all of this is all that great, buddy. And if I'm also looking ahead of me saying, I really want what she has, how am I ever going to like my life? How am I ever going to look at where I'm at and say, God, I love this. And yeah, I'm striving for better. And yeah, I'm striving for more. But I also have every single duty to look out for myself and be really careful about the words that I use and make sure that what I'm saying to myself is you're exactly where you're supposed to be, and don't discredit at all that if you genuinely wanted what that person has, you could have it. And what an honor to look at what did happen for you because you have it way better than other people. And I know that that's a touchy subject. I know that it's touchy when people say, look at how great you got it, because people think that I'm saying you're not allowed to have hardship. It's the opposite. You are so allowed to have hardship. But if you're going to give weight to the hardship, please give weight to the good. Please. I'm not saying get rid of the hardship. I'm saying give some attention to how good you've got it in ways. If you are listening to this podcast, you have the time to. On what device are you listening to this? You know, am I censored? Not yet. Like, my ass is next, I'll tell you that much. If you're listening to this, you're likely a business owner. How fucking cool is that? It reminds me of this story, and I'll leave you with this, about my sister that I tend to tell people. My sister and I had very different journeys. And my brother, we're like de-escalating in scales of seriousness. You could say my brother's like white picket fence, CFO. Like maybe he's CEO now. McMansion and the 3 kids and the private school. Like he's just like so buttoned up. And my sister's like hippy dippy, just very like peace, love, rock and roll is my sister. And I'm just like kind of somewhere in the middle where I'm loud and all about justice and also very corporate and career oriented. And so it was interesting because, it got less serious with us as we go down the line of the siblings. And my sister was someone who I didn't really know what she was going to do with her life. Not because she was a problem or, anything like that. I mean, she was a party animal and she didn't go to college, which is fine. I didn't judge her for that. But I was kind of like, what's her road going to look like? What's she going to do? She like took some waitressing jobs and took some jobs at different places. And I was just kind of like wondering like what the path is there. She joins AmeriCorps. She meets her now husband, John, incredible, incredible man. They've been married 11 years, I want to say, 2 beautiful kids. They run a website company. What's really cool about my sister and her husband is that they moved into a van in like van life. But this was like before van life was a word. Like we were like, you're gonna what? You're gonna move into a van? You're gonna build a kitchen in a van? No, you're not. What are you talking about? And they did. They fully outfitted a van with a working kitchen and a shower outside of the van and a bed that pulled out into be a queen size. And they brought, I think it was 3 dogs on the road with them. And they did it for a long ass time. And they built this website all around van life and how to build out a van and how to live in van life. And it became one of the like largest resources for van life online. And it was crazy because they monetized this experience and they did incredibly well with it. And here's somebody who didn't go a traditional route. When I'm kicking off my career, I'm looking at her like, what is she gonna do? And she could be quote unquote behind me. And I'm sure maybe at times she felt that way. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she may have felt that way. To see them build this career for themselves where they were making a fucking killing was just so cool. And it reminded me of this quote that I always tend to use when it comes back to my sister, which is, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking it's stupid. And why I see this in particular with my sister, but also with you, is because there's this idea of like, everything should climb a tree. And so if there's a fish trying to climb a tree instead of going where it needs to be, which is the water, then that fish could be thinking, I am so stupid. Why can't I figure this out? When it's like, bitch, the river's right there. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes you are just doing something so astronomically wrong for you. And there's a time in your life where you have to say, do I need to push further or do I need to redirect? And sometimes you'll get that answer right. And sometimes you'll get that answer wrong. And all it is an understanding that that person that you want to be, that person you compare yourself to, whether it's a version of you that your parents gave you, whether it's a version of you you dreamt of, whether it's a person you compare yourself to, they do not have it all going on. The things you're great at, they may not be great at. You do not have any more or less hardship than someone else. They have hardship, and they could look at what you have that you love and say, I would do anything for that. And we complain about those things sometimes. So I am not saying completely rid yourself of this comparison, completely rid yourself of, wanting or craving something different. All of that is allowed to be there, but equally give yourself your flowers and give yourself the time and the grace and the journey. Because I'll tell you what, if you want everything done in your 20s, if you want every win in your 30s, what are you going to celebrate when you're 50? Because I want a big life for all of it. I don't want to be vegging out on a couch at 65 yelling at a TV because I've got nothing else to achieve. I want to be always pushing myself to be different and to grow and to experience. You're going to see a cookbook coming from me when I'm, 50. You're going to see a million more lives of mine lived because I'm not done and I just got started and I'm 37. If you're older than me, I want to know if you resonate with this. And I want to remind you that even if you're 45, 50, 60 listening to this, you have more time too. It is not too late to get in shape. It is not too late to create a better relationship with your friends and family. It is not too late for you to try a new hobby or to shift jobs. You can do those things. And if you're in your 40s, your 30s, root into yourself deeply. And if you're in your 20s, fuck some shit up, dude. Have some fun. You deserve it. You're not going to ruin everything. Just don't go to jail. Don't con people. But, have an extra drink. Stay out an hour later. Take that random trip. That's what life is about. And I hope I helped you think a little differently about comparing yourself to what versions of yourself could have existed if you blah, blah, blah. And if all of this was taken away, you likely would miss it. The things you wouldn't miss, get rid of them today. I'll leave you with that. If you want to talk through this at all, bring it to office hours. We do office hours weekly inside of the Doers Club. We do open up those monthly for free members if you want to join Access Pass or if you want to join the library to gain access to those resources. And I will see you soon.